In all countries, the first duty of the state is to protect the people from anarchy, invasion, and insurrection. But sometimes in history, the rebels become the rulers. In the story of China, we've reached the 14th century and the beginning of China's most dazzling age. Here in Nanjing is the tomb of the founder of that age, one of the greatest Chinese emperors. And yet the man who built this was a rebel.
The story of the man who rose to this splendor is, well, literally incredible. He came from the poorest peasant family. His mother and father had given him away when he was a child. He'd spent years as a wandering beggar, as a penniless Buddhist monk. He'd risen through the ranks of the secret peasant societies fighting against the government and won a series of staggering victories, both against the government and against his peasant rivals. When he became emperor, he gave himself the title Hongwu, literally, above all, mighty in war, a terminator. He was suspicious, coarse, brutal, utterly ruthless, but a creative genius. And he founded one of the greatest eras of stability in government and in society and high civilization in the history of the world. The new dynasty was to be called the bringer of light, Ming.
China has been a great power for most of its history, and yet repeatedly invaded and subjugated by foreigners. When the future Emperor Hongwu was young, China was under the rule of the Mongols, whose empire stretched to the gates of Europe. But in the 1350s, the Mongol Empire began to crumble. In China, resistance armies rose against them in different regions. But then the land was torn apart as warlords fought each other in civil war. Chaos ruled, but opportunity beckoned for the peasant general Zhu Yuanzhang. Here in Nanjing, Zhu made his stronghold. With his reputation for justice and good governance, vast numbers of refugees flowed into the city, a safe haven in time of war. And now the people called on Zhu to declare himself emperor. But he was a peasant and unwilling to take power, so he asked for a sign, a tale told by the traditional storytellers.
朱元璋的人生经历也很多啊，做过小偷的，做过和尚的。哪晓得到了最后功成名就的时候，大家就推举他做皇帝。朱元璋怕自己的功不够，不敢做皇帝，他就多过上场了，说我能不能登基呢？ 哪晓得就在这个几天当中，天天是乌云密布，是倾盆大雨。哪晓得就在登基那一天啊，哎呀，晴空万里，是阳光普照。朱元璋这个时候坐在龙椅之上，心里头一句话：天父母。
That same year, 1368, now the Hongwu Emperor, he drove the Mongols out of North China and made Nanjing capital of his new dynasty. And now he sets out to rebuild the Chinese state, not with Confucian ideas of virtue which had inspired the Sung Golden Age, but by force and fear. He surrounded his capital with giant walls to show the might and legitimacy of Ming rule.
It's just epic, isn't it? This isn't a castle, it's a gate. 3 great courtyards leading to the main gate. From the moat, you've got to cover about 1 kilometre to get through it into the city.
Believing himself to be guided by heaven, Hongwu reshaped the layout of Nanjing as a cosmic city based on ancient Taoist mystical beliefs.
The capital that the emperor had created was the greatest city on earth, and it still has the greatest set of city walls on earth, 33 kilometres of them. Like a crouched tiger and a coiled dragon, it was said, snaking over hills and round the rivers and lakes. It was thought to represent the constellation of Ursa Major, the Big Dipper, along with Ursa Minor, and the 13 city gates matched the 13 great stars. The center of power would replicate the harmonious order of heaven, whose mandate had now passed to the ruler of the Ming.
Hongwu now set out to put an all-powerful state at the center of people's lives. His thirst for control is even stamped on the bricks in the city wall.
Now, look at this. This is a wonderful insight into Ming power. Late 1300s, they got a census, they registered households. The country was thousands of, what we'd call tithings, groups of communities. And 152 of these areas contributed to making the bricks for this vast enterprise here. And all the bricks are stamped, just look at that, with who made it and where it was made. So if you made a bad brick, they knew who you were and where to find you.
But for the real story of Hongwu's revolution, you have to leave the city and go out into the countryside. For here, he thought, was the true soul of China. Born a peasant, Hongwu identified with the peasants. He registered all land to make taxes fairer. He had irrigation systems built and reduced the demands for forced labor. For him, the village was the basis of society. Villages like this one, Tangyue in Anhui. Here, the Bao family were head of their tithing, and they soon rose in the Ming state.
Let's just have a look at where we are. I've got your lovely map here.
Yes. This location is the east side of this village and also a main entrance from the Xiexan County. So here is the Ming ritual center in the Ming dynasty.
So we've got a street, we've got an academy for education, and a temple.
Yeah.
So the village is people are making money now.
Yes.
And the family used their money to build ancestral halls for their men and their women, who did their duty as loyal wives and mothers under the new order. The Bao story is told in the old printed edition of their family history, first put together in the Ming.
So how many copies of something like this would be produced?
这是以木板刻的，然后呢手工给它印出来的。它这个书呢，一方面是 不会印太多，它是多少个范头，多少个派别。到明朝就是报项衔，就是你们看的最后一个牌坊，它是兵部右侍郎，但是因为他得掌这个军权呢，在边疆的时候有骚乱了，有这个好像这个治安问题了，就叫他去治理。
Hong Wu had been an outlaw in these hills, and his bitter experience of the time of anarchy drove him to compile an all-embracing set of laws and punishments, the Great Ming Code. It drew on 1,000 years of Chinese law, but its severity has never been forgotten. Here, one local story has been turned into a play showing Ming law at work. An innocent woman is condemned for the murder of her new husband. Accused of infidelity, she's tortured and executed by a harsh magistrate.
就是民妇黄秀英发现呢，就是她是寻找她自己的丈夫，后来发现她的丈夫在月亮坝上就是死了嘛，然后后来就是到这个府衙到公堂上来向老爷来告状来，现在报案，想让老爷来给她寻找一下这个丈夫到底是怎么回事。
But the body on the dam wasn't her husband. He turns up, but too late. Hong Wu's strict law had taken its course. But as the tale is remembered by the people of this town, the letter of Ming law was not always justice.
我们这个刑判在当代来讲是最严格的、最惨的，特别是对女同志，太惨了，特别是那个墨驴。 这个家属也是很惨的，那个墨驴坐上去对女同志那惨不忍睹。
So, like other autocrats in history, Hong Wu wanted to force people to be good. In a country so vast and so diverse, the state had to be seen to be strong. If I'm lenient, he said, how am I a good ruler? How will the people live peaceful lives? Hong Wu's rule rested on the hard realities of power. But his grandfather had been a village diviner, and the emperor also believed implicitly in divination. I rest neither night nor day, he said, to restore the ancient customs of the people. By returning to the roots of Chinese culture, he thought he could find the Tao, the true way, the right direction. The Wu family firm have been making these divination compasses since the Ming.
每一个罗盘的指针呢，都是通过祖传的这个天然陨石磁化，可以保证这个指针呢永不退磁。它在磁化了之后呢，安装到罗盘上以后啊，在后面的使用过程当中，它可以通过这个地球上的磁场不断的自我冲刺所以我们叫永不退磁。
The Ming dynasty itself would last for nearly 300 years. But Hong Wu's reign would be a turning point in Chinese history. He concentrated power in the person of the emperor himself. It would prove a dangerous legacy. In 1398, he died, and China was plunged into crisis.
If a person of such authority, of such stature, dies, who takes over? And is the next person in line as able with the same kind of vision? Could he do the job?
As his successor, Hong Wu had named his grandson, but the boy's uncle rose against him.
He took the
excuse of weeding out disloyal ministers and staged uprising. And then, after 3 years of civil war, he took the throne and became the Yongle Emperor.
Yongle. It means perpetual happiness. And when a tyrant calls himself that, you have to watch out. Having done away with his nephew, he ruthlessly purged his enemies.
Of course, people knew he was a usurper, but there were rumors also that he was illegitimate, that he hadn't been the son of the first emperor Hongwu. So he ordered all the ministers of the previous ruler to swear allegiance to him or die. And among them was the chief minister, Fang Xiaoru. Loyal, severe, honest. And he was ordered to write the edict proclaiming the legitimacy of the new emperor. He threw his brush down. "I would rather die," he said. "You are not the true emperor. Where is your nephew?" The emperor ordered his death, but with the most cruel sentence that was possible under Chinese law. Death by 9 degrees. That meant that not only you died, but your parents and your grandparents and your children and your grandchildren and your brothers and your cousins and your nephews, to 9 degrees of relationship. And the emperor paused and said, "But make it 10.
And now Yongle took a momentous decision. In 1403, he ordered the building of a new capital at his own power base 700 miles to the north. There, on top of the old Mongol capital, he built a vast new city, Beijing.
This is Tiananmen Square in the heart of today's Beijing. And it's a great place to get a sense of the majestic scale of the Ming Dynasty city. Over there, Tiananmen Gate, the gate of heavenly peace, with the famous portrait of Chairman Mao above it. You go through the gate and you're into the imperial city and the forbidden city in its very heart.
The construction of Beijing took 1 million men 20 years. Like other autocrats in history, Yongle wanted to create an architecture of absolute power. But Ming Beijing was more than an imperial capital. It was also a vast ritual space where the emperor petitioned the powers of heaven to ensure the fertility of the earth and the stability of the social order.
Well, this is the end point of that great way that we traced all the way from Tiananmen Square. It's the altar of heaven. This is the site of the most sacred rituals in the Ming Dynasty state. I find this an incredibly moving place, even when you're surrounded with all the business of tourism. This altar symbolizes that Chinese search to find harmony between the 3 layers of the cosmos, symbolized in this: the earth, humanity, and the heavens.
Reaping the benefits of stability, in the early 1400s, small market towns sprang up everywhere, and China's economy began to grow and diversify. In a gigantic engineering project, the Grand Canal was refurbished for 1,000 miles between Beijing and the south, ferrying raw materials, timber and rice up to the new capital. It's still a mainstay of the Chinese economy today.
So this is a nice way of life, Mr. Hu. I like the calmness of it.
我觉得您对船上的生活很平静啊，很。
哎，是的，早上很平静的，对。一家人我们都在船上，后边呢卧室什么都有的，后边呢卧室、卫生间都有的。要是没有睡了，几个人要是讲船客多了，还能就是打打麻将，是不是看看电视。
How much of the year do you spend on the boat?
基本上也得350天，要回家10天半个月的就行。
Helped by the Grand Canal, in the 15th century, China's economy became once more the largest in the world.
Although the renovation was an imperial project, there's thousands of small operators, individual boat owners like Mr. Hu here, who conduct their own business. A person wrote at the time, travel up and down the canal and everybody is doing business.
So the Ming saw the spread of a mercantile mentality across China, making money out of trade. The population rose to between 150 and 200 million. Incredibly, in the 15th century, when less than 3 million lived in Tudor England, a third of the people of the world lived under Ming rule. So, after the shock of the Mongol occupation, China was restored. And in Chinese eyes, the borders of the Ming were again those of civilization itself. And now, rather like today, China went out to the world. In the early 1400s, decades before Columbus and Vasco da Gama, they sent 7 great voyages westwards under Admiral Zheng He. One of the fleet assembly places was the Bay of Quanzhou on the coast of Fujian.
Here in this great natural lagoon is what the Chinese in the Ming dynasty called the gathering places of the ships. This is where those huge expeditions waited at anchor for the monsoon winds. Huge fleets, 63 ocean-going vessels, the biggest of them, with 28,000 crew. Just imagine it, heading out to the barbarian countries of the West.
Zheng He was a high-ranking Muslim courtier, a eunuch. He wasn't sent to explore or trade, let alone to conquer, but to receive tribute and show off the glory of the Yongle Emperor. As for the ships themselves, little was known till the modern excavation of the Ming dockyards in Nanjing. What they found suggests the largest boats could have reached 240 feet long, the biggest wooden ships yet made. And they're building a replica now in Nanjing.
Mike, if you look at it, this is an assembly shop for a boat. It's pretty sizable, isn't it?
It's sensational, TJ. It's absolutely amazing.
This is not complete yet. It's only half the size.
It has 6 main decks with watertight compartments and a great decorated stern towering 60 feet above the keel.
All the bunks, this is natural curved.
Incredibly, it's said Zheng He had 60 of these large vessels, what they called the treasure ships.
That's just absolutely fantastic, isn't it? That is...
From the inside, it looks much bigger than outside.
It's amazing, amazing. And how many masts would a big ship like this have had?
There's 6 masts altogether, with the 2 main masts in the middle.
Yeah.
The tallest one is 38 meters. It's huge.
It's huge.
It's big mast, because only that kind of size of sail and mast can drive this boat.
Yeah, yeah. You remember the Zheng He's inscription says, "And our sails billowing like clouds."
Yes.
Pushed us on day and night.
Exactly.
Like
that's the exact description.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
When we had all these sails in full wind, it looked like that.
There's nothing approaching the treasure ships still afloat today, but an ocean-going junk sails out of Hong Kong for a children's charity, and I hitched a ride. today, as China reaches out again to the west, Zheng He has become a national hero, a symbol for the new self-confident world of Chinese expansionism and naval might. The great Ming voyages were made possible by Chinese inventions: the stern rudder, watertight compartments, and the magnetic compass, which they already had in the Tang dynasty.
So how did they navigate? Well, didn't have charts like modern charts, but Chinese merchants had sailed to the Persian Gulf before and East Africa as far back as the Tang dynasty. And this is one of the portolans that they used. Very schematic maps of direction of travel. It's a bit like a kind of London tube map almost. Top of the page here is actually India. North is that way. You sail this way from China, and the main landmarks are all actually written down in little boxes. The area of Mumbai there. Further on, the area of the Gulf of Cambay, and then towards Pakistan, the Makran coast, and Iran. And there's an associated handbook which gives you the distances between the different ports and the star directions too.
The 7 voyages between 1405 and 1433 went across the Indian Ocean to the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea and down the coast of East Africa. They brought back new knowledge, rare foods and plants, and exotic animals. Even a giraffe, which the Chinese identified with the mythical unicorn, an auspicious sign for the Yongle Emperor. But after the 6th voyage, Yongle died. And after one more expedition, the new emperor, Xuande, called a halt.
So why did they stop? The Ming dynasty at that point was the greatest power on earth. They had maybe 200 million people. They'd been the great scientific innovators. They'd made the great inventions with which the West would later dominate the world. For some Western commentators, it shows that Chinese lacked the will to pursue the boundaries of knowledge. It would be like stopping moon exploration at Apollo 8. But maybe there's something else. Maybe it's about how you use technology. And perhaps the Ming scholar bureaucrats in the end realized that their interests were better served pursuing the traditional goals of Chinese civilization, of achieving harmony between humankind and the cosmos within the borders of China.
The truth is, dominating the wider world was not on the Chinese agenda. For the Ming, after all, China was the world. But there may have been a more pressing practical reason for giving up on sea power: the threat from their old enemies, the Mongols. Out to the north, Ming armies made almost annual expeditions beyond the mountains into the vast steppe lands of Mongolia. And then in 1449, the Zheng Tong Emperor was defeated and captured by the Mongols, the greatest military fiasco in the Ming period. And that led to a massive rebuilding of the Great Wall and a new mood of defensiveness.
This is the Zhuyanguan Pass, one of the most famous passes in Chinese history, as important in Chinese history as the Khyber is in the history of India. What you're looking at now, mainly the creation of the Ming dynasty. You can see the Great Wall snaking down from the mountains all around us, coming down to this point and down there too. and it's coming down here to a great fortress. The Chinese emperors called it the first fortress of the world. You see the series of gates where the road originally ran out to Mongolia, the garrison town rooftops over there, and up there, the Buddhist and Taoist temples that served the people who lived here, bristling with weaponry, armored bowmen on the walls and the watchtowers, beacons to alert the defenses, as the Ming emperors start to define China as a Han civilization again, against what lay in the world beyond.
But at home, China was changing, especially in the rich cities of the south like Suzhou. Ming China had begun as an agricultural state with a stifling command economy. But now the growth of the market gave birth to a new urban moneyed class who would begin to loosen the grip of Ming autocracy. Suzhou, they said, was heaven on earth, like Renaissance Florence with its high culture and its palaces and mansions. And these days, you can even stay in them. This was the house of the Fang family. They were only middling merchants. But as you can see, they lived the good life.
And in your Ming Dynasty guest room, there's fine furniture, as you can see. Wooden bath that the servants would fill for you in the evening, and a lovely four-poster bed hung with muslin mosquito nets, very necessary here in Suzhou. Oh, 30 rooms, an ancestral hall and a shrine room and a little family school, all belonging to the one extended family.
The Fang family had joined a new world of conspicuous consumption, of private wealth and taste. On their table, the finest blue glazed porcelain, bought by the new rich from their local art dealers, made by thousands of indentured workers in the state pottery kilns. To meet the consumer demand, old arts reached new heights under the Ming. Among them, lacquer making. It's a craft that demands incredible attention to detail. The best work was so coveted that Ming collectors traveled hundreds of miles to buy the top brand names from the most famous houses. Now the Gun family are reviving the old techniques.
积累到一定的厚度以后，我们再把它磨平。那么在凸起的点被磨平以后，形成很多断面，那就是漆器的一种纹理。我们下面呢，就是做下一步工序。
These gorgeous things would soon become all the rage in Europe too, exported by Ming merchants, paid for by New World silver, as China connected with the growing world economy. And wealth brought leisure, time to read for both men and women. This was the golden age of Chinese fiction, with novels like The Plum in the Golden Vase, where middle-class morals were now the subject of Sex and the City satire.
长龙里弯弯两道柳叶眉，只想破碎死哟，走起个马枪不得了，可叫嘎就个认真。乖乖就忘了我们月亮了，不点忘了我们月亮啊，手就来了。所以说呢，我们月亮忘了石门庆这个样子，是一脸的不高兴。 那月亮究竟能不能做石门庆的老母呢？请听下回分解。
Such confusions of pleasure were a long way from the austere world of the first Ming emperor. Even fashion was now no longer the preserve of the ruling class.
And as regards designer labels, well, Suzhou was all the rage. If it wasn't made in Suzhou, people said, people just didn't want to wear it. The hems go up, the hems go down, and the fuddy-duddies complain that these new people, with their newfangled fashions, are erasing the class differences which were implicit in the old, traditional styles of costume.
In the cotton and silk industries, demand skyrocketed, and Suzhou silk was the best. In every village around Suzhou, they said, the people devoted all their energies to earning a living from silk. A proletariat of textile workers was emerging, but critics now asked, was all this pursuit of wealth making a better world?
So, hello,
Hi.
how are you?
Hello, fine.
I'm just looking at your beautiful silk.
Yes, this is a very traditional material.
Okay. May we have a look?
Which one do you like?
Yeah, the one with the like a
Maybe
Chinese
this one.
imperial gown, doesn't it?
Okay.
This is the kind of thing
Yes.
the mandarins used to wear.
Yeah, this is like gold color. In the button in the hair is long life. The Ming is very good, the long life. And the hair is a 5 bat.
Beautiful.
Yes.
And people buy this to make dresses or clothes or
For
what?
make a wedding dress for
Wedding?
Chinese.
A
For
wedding
Chinese.
dress.
Wedding dress. Maybe Chinese the man the jacket. For jacket is nice.
For men too?
Yes.
Really?
Like this one. Maybe.
Yeah.
I show you.
Oh, that is beautiful.
This is
isn't it?
nice. You know,
Whoa.
here is a dragon. The dragon. It's for man one is a perfect pattern.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's strength. The dragon is strong and brave, but
Yes.
good luck as well.
Yes.
Perhaps, yeah.
It's like king.
Like the king.
King,
The symbol
yeah.
of the king. Yes,
Yeah.
of course.
Yes.
Yeah, the emperor wears
See,
dragons.
Yes.
So, to paraphrase Dr. Johnson, if you were tired of Ming Suzhou, you were tired of life. And when you'd made your money and retired, you came home and left your mark with a lovely garden.
当时建园的主人是明代的一个叫王献臣，他是作为一个当时的一个官员，那么当时他花了16年的时间才建成这样一个78亩地的那个私家的一个花园。在竹城园上班的话，每天的心情都非常的舒朗。那么，如果可以给我那个的话，我愿意一直在这边工作。就是有可能说，在这个环境之下，很难体会到这种非常一个美妙的感觉。
This was one of 90 gardens in Suzhou. Adorned with playful poems and inscriptions, it was a feast for the senses. A far cry from Hongwu's day, when the land was simply there to be ploughed by the peasants.
These private gardens in the Ming dynasty were rich men's passions, passion being the operative word. They traveled hundreds of miles to bring back weirdly shaped stones to place in the garden. They dug artificial hills like this one, on which they placed gazebos where you could take in the different viewpoints. The distant fragrance hall where the lotuses were planted, the magnolia hall, and even better, the scent of snow and rosy clouds hall. The pleasures of the Ming, for some.
The gardens were nature in miniature, and as for nature at large, Ming thinkers had a lot to say about that too, in a time that saw the rise of tourism and guidebooks, especially in the remote highlands down to Yunnan and Vietnam. Here, the Ming had opened up new territories with exotic tribes and peoples. intrepid travel writers now describe their landscapes and geology. The most famous Ming travel writer was Xu Xiake.
我觉得徐霞客他首先他是一个圣人，他是一个就是旅游界他是一个游圣，他地理界他是一个伟人，我觉得他是特别伟大的一个人。他能够走常人所不能够去走的路，然后有常人不一样的一个思想，他是一个圣人，是一个伟人，我是这样理解。
Xu wrote about nature and feeling like the European romantics. In his records, he sounds like a 19th century natural scientist. But in all his wanderings from the heartland to the edge of Ming China, what we never sense is the existence of a world beyond. And the world beyond was getting closer. In August 1582, a visitor arrived in the tiny Portuguese trading post of Macau on the South China Sea. It was an event of no apparent significance in the greater scheme of things, but its repercussions would be world-shaking. The visitor was an Italian Jesuit called Matteo Ricci, and his mission, unbelievably, was to convert China to Christianity. The founding of Macau had been part of the extraordinary expansion of European powers in the few decades since Columbus discovered the New World. Small maritime states on the Atlantic seaboard, they were nothing compared with the greatness and antiquity of China. But with their new knowledge and propelled by Chinese inventions, it was the Europeans, not the Chinese, who would seize the time. And it all began with a simple trading deal.
This is the old fortress on the top of Macau. Portuguese had made their earliest explorations of the Chinese coast 1513-14. And then in 1557, the Ming government allowed them to actually settle on this peninsula and to live here. Not a formal treaty, and the Ming government looked after them very carefully. They had a landward wall with garrisons to make sure that they didn't come out of here except at the allotted times, twice a year, when they could sail up to Canton to trade.
It was the Europeans' first foothold. Here in the south, Ricci worked for 15 years learning to speak Chinese like a native. And then, in 1598, he set off overland to Beijing. The China he travelled through, he wrote, was the best governed state on earth and a deeply moral civilization. But Christianity, he thought, would be the completion of their faith. To achieve that, his idea was to go to the very top, to find a Chinese emperor like Constantine who'd converted the Roman Empire to Christianity.
He's an honorary Chinese person.
Yeah, and a great person.
Yeah.
He didn't succeed in that, but astonishingly, there are 70 million Chinese Christians today. And in a sense, you could say their story begins with Ricci.
When he was in Shaozhou, he wrote two important books. One is a true doctrine of the Lord of Heaven. That's a Catholic doctrine. Mm-hmm. And another one is Euclid's Elements.
Euclid's Elements.
That's very important, mathematical or books. Even after Matthew's death, people that time they say, oh, we have never had a foreigner to be buried in the capital. Mm-hmm. And one important official that time said one word, say, only for the Euclid's Elements can he bury it here. So it's enough.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's, so you can see how important the works he has done.
Most Chinese scholars were more interested in that new knowledge than what one described as the Christians' strange theology. Ricci prepared for the emperor a map of the world on which the Chinese learned of new continents and saw that the world was far bigger than they'd ever imagined. And in Ricci's Western science, the Mandarins found even more astonishing revelations.
These Westerners are passionate about astronomy, said one of the Chinese scholars. And they've brought instruments with them connected with that science. And they believe that the Earth hangs in the firmament and that it's a globe, and that if you go all the way round westwards, you end up going eastwards. And if you go all the way up northwards, you go over the top of the world, and then you travel southwards and come back to where you started. As you can see, it's an astrolabe. Oh, but what an astrolabe. Of course, it enables you to take very accurate sun measurements and star measurements. Chinese had used a lunar calendar prior to the arrival of the Jesuits, Matteo Ricci, and now they're, with imperial patronage, have switched their science to a solar calendar, which is much more accurate, of course.
But the implications of the new Western science were about far more than cosmology. They were a challenge to the entire system of thought developed by the Chinese over so many millennia. With Western ideas and Spanish silver from the Americas, Ming China was being drawn into the wider world. The question was, how would it respond?
Hello.
Ricci himself died in China in 1610. In the end, China had converted him, not the other way round. He'd come to love and admire the Chinese and what he called their 4,000-year-old tradition. Ricci's Chinese diary was published after his death, and in it he makes some thought-provoking comparisons between the Europeans and the Chinese.
Though they have a well-equipped army and navy that could easily conquer the neighboring nations, neither the king nor his people ever think of waging wars of aggression. In this respect, it seems to me, says Ricci, that they are very different from the peoples of Europe, who are forever disturbing their neighbors and entirely consumed with the idea of supreme domination.
But Ricci also saw a fatal insularity in the Chinese worldview.
The extent of the Chinese kingdom is so vast, and its borders are so distant, and yet their lack of knowledge about the world beyond the oceans is so complete that they think their kingdom includes the whole world.
By the early 1600s, as the world was changing around them, the emperors were losing touch with the people, shutting themselves up in the Forbidden City, shunning the hard work and moral purpose needed to run the state. We've an insight into those times from the writer Zhang Dai, who came from a rich landowning family here in Shaoxing.
You can still make out the shape of the Ming Dynasty city, great rectangle framed by tree-lined canals. This was a great cultural and economic center. And this is where the Zhang family had set up in their beautiful estate in what Granddad Zhang called the Happiness Garden.
Across the country, the gap between rich and poor was widening, while Zhang wrote about the life of the rich like a Chinese Proust.
张岱，我觉得啦，他这个在我们中国明清的文化史上面啦，还有文学史上这个定位啊，应该说是非常高的。陶庵梦忆啊，西湖梦行啦，它反映了什么呢？明代，他回忆过去明代这个末年，我们江南社会啦，十分繁华。
But the prosperity of the Ming had been bought on the backs of the poor, while the rich still lived the good life like the Edwardian aristocracy on the eve of the First World War.
Very beautiful hotel.
This is Zhang's house. It's now a hotel.
Hello. It's very nice to be here. My name is
Zhang was typical of his class in the late Ming. He had leisure and no responsibilities. A career writer in a proudly literary city.
Maybe held 205 years old.
2,500 years old.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think we've got towns as old as that in England.
Looking back, Zhang saw that society was corrupt and unjust. I had it all in my youth, he wrote. I was a silk-stocking dandy addicted to luxury. But it was all an illusion. Social critics were now asking whether the pursuit of wealth had eroded the idea of service to the state. Some blamed the imperial system itself. Let's throw the scoundrels out, they wrote, and died for it. In the 1630s, the crisis came. Beyond the lantern-lit pavilions, gangs of unemployed roamed the countryside. The silk workers went on strike. Peasant rebellions raised their flags. And then even nature seemed to turn against them. The Yellow River broke its banks, overwhelming the dikes so carefully restored by Ming engineers a century before. Whole cities and towns were wiped out. Epidemics and famines killed millions. The old cycles of Chinese history had returned to haunt them. And for the first time, China's rulers had discovered the limits of autocracy. Along the coasts, the government could no longer give protection to communities against bandits, outlaws, and pirates. More and more, the people were left to their own devices. Here in one village in Fujian, a public-spirited local, a retired civil servant, came back home to help out.
Hello.
Here he set up charities and in 1604 paid for walls to protect the village when the local government had run out of cash. His family, the Zhaos, are still here.
It's like a mini fortress.
In the centre of the village, he built a great fortified tower house, a refuge for the whole village in time of crisis.
That's absolutely wonderful, isn't it?
Because the soldiers, they have to watch the outside.
Yeah.
And there's only windows for the outside on the top floor.
You can see the landscape all around from the top floor. Hi, thank you. So, Mr. Zhao, very nice to meet you. Ni hao. Hi. Hi, Yanchu.
And as in so many places in China, the Zhao family still know their ancestors' story.
迄阵啊，在佛坛竹米啊，本来后西种山，迄阵啊就讲住在佛坛竹米，就讲海口街无。啊，就是钓鱼好，因就
开始当官，在浙江省安察使当副署了。然后1600年是告老还乡再建的，意思就这样。
退休以后，在1600年古老回乡的时候，这个总就。 论心仿照开封的建制，所以来建完延平楼。
那为了这最主要是防疫啦。
就是 at that time there were many pirates on the sea and pirates attacked them, so Zhao Fan came back to build this Zhao's family's castle.
the harsh justice of the first Ming emperor, a guarantee of order, was another world now. As Mr. Zhao's son observed in 1619, the days of peace seem a long time ago. And in 1644, the end came. In the north, in Manchuria, the Manchus had created a powerful new state. And sensing China's weakness, their armies surged down onto Beijing. To avoid capture, the Emperor Chongzhen hanged himself from a tree on Coal Hill, overlooking the Forbidden City. The tree is still there, with his memorial. Next year, the Manchu armies swept across the Yangtze. If they resisted, the rich cities of the south were devastated. In Shaoxing, Grandad Zhang's happiness garden was wrecked, along with the family mansion. And the Chinese Proust, Zhang Dai, fled to become a penniless Buddhist monk.
As I think about the things that I did in the past, he said, I write them all down to beg forgiveness. In life, everything has a payback. The rags I'm wearing now are a payback for the fine furs and silks that I once had. The straw that I sleep on is a payback for the soft beds. The smoke in my eyes and the dung in my nostrils, payback for the voluptuous fragrances of the past. And this sack on my shoulder, a payback to all those who used to carry me. For every kind of sin, there is a kind of retribution.
I was nearly 50 years old that year of 1645, Zhang wrote. My country was shattered, and I had lost everything. Looking back, it was as if my life under the Ming had been a dream. Next time, China's last empire, the glory of the Qing, and the fateful coming of the British.